Revolution of the People. Egyptians riot. Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak named a vice president Saturday. For the first time since coming to power nearly 30 years ago, a clear step toward setting up a successor in the midst of the biggest anti-government protests of his regime. After 5 days of protests, Cairo was engulfed in chaos. There was rampant looting and lawlessness was spreading fast. Residents of affluent neighborhoods were boarding up their houses against gangs of thugs roaming the streets with knives and sticks, and gunfire was heard in some neighborhoods. At least 3 people were killed as they stormed the Interior Ministry, Al Jazeera reported. Overall, so far, at least 74 people have been killed and thousands wounded. NBC News reported dramatic scenes of tanks and armored personnel carriers fanning out across the city of 18 million, guarding key government buildings. There was rampant looting and protesters, many smeared in red, screaming and yelling in the streets. The military was protecting major tourist and archaeological sites, such as the Egyptian Museum, home to some of the country's most treasured antiquities, as well as the Cabinet Building. The military closed the pyramids on the outskirts of Cairo, Egypt's premier tourist site. Looters broke into the Egyptian Museum during anti-government protests late Friday and destroyed 2 pharaonic mummies. Egypt's top archaeologist told state television the museum in central Cairo is adjacent to the headquarters of the ruling National Democratic Party that protesters had earlier set ablaze. Flames were seen still pouring out of the party headquarters early Saturday. The 2-story museum, built in 1902, houses tens of thousands of objects in its galleries and storerooms. Also, on Friday, protesters burned down the headquarters of Mubarak's ruling party along the Nile and set fire to other buildings, roaming the streets of downtown Cairo in defiance of a night curfew enforced by the First Army deployment. Thousands and thousands of protesters defied the curfew for the second night Saturday, standing their ground in the main Tahrir Square in a resounding rejection of Mubarak's attempt to hang on to power with promises of reform and a new government. What we want is for Mubarak to leave, not just his government, said a demonstrator in the city's main square. We will not stop protesting until he goes. A few tanks were deployed in the square, but there have been no clashes reported between protesters and the military at all, and many feel the army is with them. On one tank was scrawled black graffiti, "Down with Mubarak." In contrast, protesters have attacked police who are hated for their brutality. On Friday, 17 police stations throughout Cairo were torched, with protesters stealing firearms and ammunition and setting some jailed suspects free. They also burned dozens of police vehicles and trucks in Cairo, Alexandria, and Suez. On Saturday, protesters besieged a police station in the Giza neighborhood of Cairo, looted and pulled down Egyptian flags before burning the building to the ground. One army captain joined the demonstrators, who hoisted him up on their shoulders while chanting slogans against Mubarak. The officer ripped a picture of the president. "We don't want him. We will go after him," demonstrators shouted. They decried looting and sabotage, saying, "Those who love Egypt should not sabotage Egypt." Violence erupted when thousands and thousands of protesters tried to storm the Interior Ministry and police opened fire. At least 3 protesters were killed, and their bodies were carried throughout the crowd. The protesters are unified in one main demand: Mubarak and his family must go. The movement is a culmination of years of simmering frustration over a government they see as corrupt, heavy-handed, and neglectful of grinding poverty. Mubarak sacked his cabinet Saturday and promised reforms to try to quell the protests, but it did not satisfy the demonstrators, who were out in force again to demand a complete change of regime. Mubarak, confronted with the most dire threat to his 3 decades of rule, faced his nation for the first time since the unrest began in a televised address after midnight. He made vague promises of social reform in what is likely to be interpreted as an attempt to cling to power rather than a genuine pledge to solve Egypt's pressing problems. He also defended his security forces and accused the protesters of plotting to destabilize Egypt and destroy the legitimacy of his regime, outraging those still in the streets well into the night. "We want Mubarak to go, and instead he is digging in further," said one protester. "He thinks it is calming down the situation, but he is just angering people even more." Buildings, statues, and even armored security vehicles were covered in anti-Mubarak graffiti, including the words, "Mubarak must fall." The military extended the hours of the night curfew imposed Friday in the 3 major cities where the worst violence has been seen: Cairo, Alexandria, and Suez. State television said it would begin at 4 p.m. and last until 8 a.m. In the capital on Friday night, hundreds of young men carted away televisions, fans, and stereo equipment, looted from the ruling National Democratic Party near the Egyptian Museum. Others around the city looted banks, smashed cars, tore down street signs, and pelted armored riot police vehicles with paving stones torn from roadways. But a police crackdown drew harsh criticism from the Obama administration and even a threat to reduce a $1.5 billion foreign aid program if Washington's most important Arab ally escalates the use of force. On Friday, massive crowds numbering in the tens of thousands overwhelmed police forces in Cairo and other cities and pelted them with rocks and firebombs. The primary weapons of the police have been tear gas, batons, and sticks. They have also fired rubber bullets and used water cannons. Mubarak has called in the military to enforce the curfew in Cairo and other cities. The United States has also urged Mubarak to exercise caution with the protesters. And the United States, for the past 60 years, has sent more than $68 billion in economic and military aid to Egypt. Yes, these are massive riots against the ruler of Egypt, and all these are more signs of the times, the end times, transition days, which is a continuing day-by-day process. Everything that must change quickly or rapidly, and for the better. Yes, it's time. Matthew chapter 24, verse 6. "And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled. For all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. 7. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. And there shall be famines, and pestilences, and earthquakes in diverse places. 8. All these are the beginning of sorrows." Revelation chapter 10. "And I saw another mighty angel come down from heaven, clothed with a cloud, and a rainbow was upon his head, and his face was as it were the sun, and his feet as pillars of fire. 2. And he had in his hand a little book open, and he set his right foot upon the sea, and his left foot on the earth. 3. And cried with a loud voice, as when a lion roars. And when he had cried, 7 thunders uttered their voices. 4. And when the 7 thunders had uttered their voices, I was about to write, and I heard a voice from heaven, saying unto me, Seal up those things which the 7 thunders uttered, and write them not. 5. And the angel which I saw stand upon the sea and upon the earth lifted up his hand to heaven. 6. And swore by him that lives forever and ever, who created heaven and the things that therein are, and the earth and the things that therein are, and the sea and the things which are their end, but there should be time no longer. 7. But in the days of the voice of the seventh angel, when he shall begin to sound, the mystery of God should be finished, as he has declared to his servants the prophets. And, again, like I say, it's time for all prophecy to be fulfilled. And there are many different kinds of signs happening all around the world and increasing in frequency. What kind of world are we leaving to the future generations?